The Burmese Siamese War, Thai lit. War of the Second Fall of Ayutthaya, was the second military conflict between the Konbaung Dynasty of Burma and the banned Phlu Luang dynasty of Siam, and the war that ended the 4-century-old Siamese kingdom. Nonetheless, the Burmese were soon forced to give up the hard-won gains when the Chinese invasions of the homeland forced a complete withdrawal by the end of 1767. A new Siamese dynasty, to which the current Thai monarchy traces its origins, emerged to reunify Siam by 1770. This war was a continuation of the War of 1759 to 1760. The casus belli of this war were also the control of the Tenasserim coast and its trade, and the Siamese support for the rebels in the Burmese border regions. The war began in August 1765 when a 20,000-strong northern Burmese army invaded northern Siam, and was joined in by 3 southern armies of over 20,000 in October in a pincer movement on Ayutthaya. By late January 1766, the Burmese armies had overcome numerically superior but poorly coordinated Siamese defences, and converged before the Siamese capital. The siege of Ayutthaya began during the first Chinese invasion of Burma. The Siamese believed that if they could hold out until the rainy season, the seasonal flooding of the Ayutthayan central plain would force a retreat. But King Konbaung of Burma believed that the Chinese war was a minor border dispute, and decided to continue the siege. During the rainy season of 1766, the battle moved to the waters of the flooded plain but failed to change the status quo. When the dry season came, the Chinese launched a much larger invasion, but Konbaung still refused to recall the troops. In March 1767, King Ayutthaya of Siam offered to become a tributary, but the Burmese demanded an unconditional surrender. On the 7th of April 1767, the Burmese sacked the starving city for the second time in history, committing atrocities that have left a major black mark on Burmese-Thai relations to the present day. Thousands of Siamese captives were relocated to Burma. The Burmese occupation was short-lived. In November 1767, the Chinese again invaded with the largest force yet, finally convincing Konbaung to withdraw his forces from Siam. In the ensuing Siamese Civil War, Thaksin's Thonburi forces emerged the sole winner by mid-1770. The Burmese had also defeated a fourth Chinese invasion by December 1769. By then, a new stalemate had taken hold. Burma had annexed the lower Tenasserim coast but again failed to eliminate Siam as the sponsor of rebellions in her eastern and southern borderlands. In the following years, Konbaung was preoccupied by the Chinese threat, and did not renew the Siamese War until 1775, only after Lan Na had revolted again with Siamese support. The post-Ayutthaya Siamese leadership proved more than capable. They defeated the next 2 invasions, and annexed Lan Na in the process. Background: the Burmese-Siamese War was a continuation of the War of 1759 to 1760, the casus belli of which was a dispute over the control of the Tenasserim coast and its trade, and Siamese support for ethnic Mon rebels of the fallen restored Ayutthaya kingdom of Lower Burma. The 1760 war, which claimed the life of the dynasty founder King Ayutthaya, was inconclusive. Although Burma regained control of the upper Tenasserim coast at Tavoy, it achieved none of its other objectives. Following the war, the new Burmese king Nongdorgi was beset with rebellions in Ava and Toungoo, and instabilities spread to the border regions. Lan Na was in open rebellion with active Siamese support. In the Burmese south too, the Siamese readily provided shelter to the defeated ethnic Mon rebels who had raised an unsuccessful rebellion in 1762. Things calmed down for a moment after the Lan Na rebellion was suppressed in January 1763. Nongd Orgi, who had been putting down multiple rebellions since his accession, was eager to lead a peaceful reign. He chose not to renew a war with Siam despite Siam's active support of the Lan Na rebellion and continued sheltering of Mon rebels. But Nongd Orgi died in November 1763, and was succeeded by his brother Shanbiushan, who had wanted to continue the war with Siam since the end of the last war. The Siamese leadership was alarmed by Shanbiushan's accession. Knowing that another war was inevitable, the Siamese leadership accelerated the policy of keeping Burmese regions unstable. In mid-1764, the Siamese successfully encouraged the ethnic Mon governor of Tavoy, who was appointed by Along Paya only 4 years earlier, to switch sides. Shanbiushan was forced to send an army led by Maha Norata, who retook Tavoy in November 1764. Likewise, instabilities resumed in Lan Na right after the Burmese army left in February 1764, forcing the Burmese to return to the region later in the year. By January 1765, the Burmese armies were massed at Tavoy in the south and Chiang Mai in the north, preparing for the next war. Prelude to war. Burmese Preparations. As the deputy commander-in-chief in the 1760 war, Shanbiushan used his first-hand experience to plan the next invasion. His general plan called for a pincer movement on the Siamese capital from the north and the south. He appointed two of the country's most decorated soldiers, Maha Norata and Nyamwyothithapa, to lead the invasion. On the southern front, he kept Maha Norata and his 20,000-strong army, who had just put down the Tavoy rebellion at Tavoy. The control of Tavoy now gave the Burmese the shortest route towards Ayutthaya. In the north, he sent Nyamwyothithapa to raise an army from the Shan states throughout 1764. By November, Nyamwyothithapa commanded a 20,000-strong army at Kangtung, preparing to leave for Chiang Mai. As customary, the Shan regiments were led by their own Saupis. The next step in Shanbiushan's plan was to outflank the Siamese in the north and northeast. He ordered Nyamwyothithapa to acquire the Laotian states of Vientiane and Luang Prabang. Vientiane was acquired without a fight in January 1765. Luang Prabang put up a fight but was defeated in March 1765. The defeated Laotian states then were forced to provide levies to the Northern Army. The entire northern Burmese command now had over 20,000 men. On the 29th of April 1765, a northern invasion army of 20,000 was posted at Lampang at the Siamese border. While the main Burmese armies were massed at the Siamese border, a rebellion broke out in Manipur. Characteristically, Shanbiushan did not recall the armies. Instead, he personally led an expedition forced to put down the rebellion himself in December 1764. Having arrived back at Ava in April 1765, the Burmese king then sent 10,000 men to reinforce the southern army, which now numbered 30,000. The Burmese army now had mobilized 50,000 men. The Burmese artillery corps were led by a group of about 200 French soldiers who were captured in the Battle of Siam in 1756 during the Burmese Civil War of 1752 to 1757. Siamese preparations. The Siamese too had been busy planning their defenses since Shanbiushan accession. The defenses had been on alert since they got the Tavoy governor to revolt in mid-1764. King Ekathat had already launched a massive mobilization drive across the entire country when Maha Norata came down with his army and retook Tavoy in November 1764. In all, the Siamese southern defences alone comprised over 60,000 troops. Ekathat placed several of his best legions along the entire western arc from the Three Pagodas Pass to Kanchanaburi across Tavoy, to the Gulf of Siam in the extreme south to face off Mahanarata. In the north, the main Siamese defensive line began at Sukorda and Phitsanulok. The defences farther north, immediately facing the northern Burmese army, relied on small forts built by local chiefs. Finally, the Siamese relied on a heavily fortified Ayutthaya city, strategically situated at the estuary of two rivers where high-rising waters in the rainy season had kept it safe against enemies over the centuries. The Siamese had used the wealth to acquire several thousand muskets and artillery. Some of the cannon were 30 feet long, and fired 100-pound balls. As was the case in 1760, foreign mercenaries were hired for Ayutthaya's defense. At least one English ship was enlisted for her broadsides. Invasion. Burmese battle plan. The Burmese battle plan was greatly shaped by their experience in the 1759–1760 war. First, they would avoid a single-pronged attack route along the narrow Gulf of Siam coastline, which they discovered could easily be clogged up by more numerous Siamese forces. In 1760, the Burmese were forced to spend nearly 3 months to fight the way out of the coastline. This time, they planned a multi-pronged attack from all sides to stretch out the numerically superior Siamese defenses. Secondly, they would start the invasion early to maximize the dry season campaign period. In the previous war, Along Palu started the invasion too late. When the Burmese finally reached Ayutthaya in mid-April, they only had a little over a month left before the rainy season to take the city. This time, they elected to begin the invasion at the height of the rainy season. By starting the invasion early, the Burmese hoped their armies would be within a striking distance from Ayutthaya at the beginning of the dry season. Start of invasion. Northern Front. The invasion began on the 23rd of August 1765 at the height of the rainy season, when the 20,000-strong northern Burmese army invaded Siam down the Luang River. The southern armies stayed put. The reason for the earlier start of the northern army was that it was much farther away from Ayutthaya than its southern counterparts. Still, the strategy did not work as planned. The northern army's advance was greatly slowed by the rainy weather and the petty chiefs who put up a fight, forcing Thithapate to storm town after town. Nonetheless, Thithapate fought his way down the Luang, finally taking Tak and Kamphaeng Phet by the end of the rainy season. Southern Front. In the meantime, Mahanarata opened the southern front on the 23rd of October 1765 in 3 directions. He had 20,000 to 30,000 under his command. A small army invaded by the Three Pagodas Pass towards Suphanburi. Another small army invaded down the Tenasserim coast towards Mergui and Tenasserim town. However, the main thrust of his attack was at Kanchanaburi. His 20,000-strong main southern army invaded via the Maita Pass. Kanchanaburi fell with little resistance. The main reason for the quick fall of Kanchanaburi could be that the Burmese were more battle-hardened, but it could also be that the Siamese command miscalculated where the Burmese main attack would come from, and had not sufficiently reinforced the fort to withstand a major attack. Judging by the Siamese chroniclers' reporting of the main attack route, the Siamese command appeared to have believed that the main Burmese attack would come from the Gulf of Siam coastline. instead of the most obvious and shortest route via Kanchanaburi. The Siamese sources say that Mahanarata's main invasion route came from southern Tenasserim, crossing the Tenasserim range at Champhon and Phutburi. The path is totally different from the Kanchanaburi route reported by the Burmese chronicles. Historian Kyorthet specifically adds that the main attack route was via the Maeta Pass. The Champhon route is unlikely to have been the main attack route, as it was even farther south than along Palya's Kuiburi route. It means the Burmese would have had a longer route to go back up the Gulf of Siam coast, without the element of surprise that Along Palya enjoyed in the 1760 war. The Burmese invasion force of 1765 would have had to fight more than 3 months it took Along Palya to break out of the coast. Yet Mahanarata's army was west of Ayutthaya by December. To be sure, the smaller Burmese army that took Tenasserim could have crossed over at Champhon and marched up the coast, although the most southerly battles reported by the Burmese were at Ratburi and Phutburi, on the northern coast. At any rate, according to the Burmese sources, Champhon was not the main attack route. First dry season offensive Nonaburi and western Ayutthaya. After Kanchanaburi, Mahanarata's southern army marched on towards south of Ayutthaya, and faced token opposition until they reached Nonaburi about 60 kilometers south of Ayutthaya. There, they finally faced a serious Siamese defensive line guarding the route to the capital, and Mahanarata set up a garrison. The first major battle of the Southern Theatre ensued when the Siamese made a joint land-naval attack on the Burmese garrison. The naval force consisted of several warboats and a British ship which was used to bombard Burmese positions, but the Burmese defences held, and the Siamese retreated. The British ship fled to the sea. The Burmese army then marched north and was met by a Siamese force of 60,000 near west of the city, outnumbered 3-1. The more experienced Burmese army nonetheless routed the much larger Siamese army, which according to the Burmese, was chopped to pieces, forcing the remaining Siamese troops to retreat to the capital. Mahanarata had now arrived at Ayutthaya as planned, in record time, but he pulled back to the northwest of the city because he did not see Thivhapad's northern army, and because he did not want to take on another major battle with his depleted army. He fixed his headquarters near the pagoda built by Bayanang 2 centuries ago. He used the hiatus to refill the ranks with Siamese conscripts. Northern operations. Meanwhile, Nyamyo Thivhapad's northern army was still stuck in northern Siam, although the pace of his advance had improved considerably since the end of the rainy season. After taking Kamphaeng Phet, Thivhapad turned northeast and captured the main northern cities of Sukhorda and Phitsanulok. At Phitsanulok he paused to refill the ranks because in about 4 months, he had already lost many men to the grueling campaign and to preventable diseases. The local chiefs were made to drink the water of allegiance and provide conscripts to the Burmese army. While the Burmese refilled the ranks, the Siamese command belatedly sent another army to retake Phitsanulok, but the Siamese army was driven back with heavy losses. It was the last major stand by the Siamese in the north. The Siamese defense collapsed afterwards. The Burmese army then moved down by boat the Nan River, taking Phichai, Phitchatnak, Ornsarwan, and down the Chao Phraya, taking Ang Thong. They reached the environs of Ayutthaya on the 20th of January 1766, making contact with Mahanarata's army. Battle of Bang Rakan. According to Thai tradition, Nemo Thiphapad's northern army was held up for 5 months at Bang Rakan, a small village northwest of Ayutthaya by a group of simple villages. But the Burmese chronicles say that they only faced token opposition between Phitsanulok and Ayutthaya. Not all the points of this traditional Thai story can be true, as the entire northern campaign took just under 5 months. The Burmese chronicles speak of petty chiefs stalling the northern army's advance, but it was early in the campaign along the Luang River during the rainy season. The Burmese general who was actually stationed near Ayutthaya was not Thiphapat but rather Mahanarata, whose southern army waited for about a month from the northern army to show up. It appears that the 3 verified events, petty chiefs resisting Thiphapat in the north, Thiphapad's campaign period of 5 months, and Mahanarata's taking out by Ayutthaya, have merged to create this popular mythology. First Chinese invasion of Burma. In the meantime, an ominous situation had developed in the north for the Burmese. In response to Nemo Thiphapad's recruitment campaign in the northern Shan states, which the Chinese considered the territory, the Qianlong Emperor ordered an invasion of Sipsong Pana and Kengtung. In December 1765, as the Burmese waged the battles of Phitsanulok and Ayutthaya, the Chinese invasion force of 6,000 invaded, laying siege to the Burmese garrison at Kengtung. Though battle-hardened Burmese forces eventually drove back the besiegers, Burma was now fighting on 2 fronts, one of which had the largest army in the world. Nonetheless, Shun Bushan apparently believed that the border conflict could be contained as a low-grade war. He refused to recall his armies in Siam, though he did reinforce Burmese garrisons along the Chinese border in Kengtung, Kenhung and Kaungtan. Battle of Ayutthaya. Battle at the outskirts. While the Burmese garrison was battling the Chinese at Kengtung, the combined Burmese armies outside Ayutthaya were as strong as ever. Swelled by the Siamese levies, the combined Burmese invasion force now had 50,000 men, surpassing the pre-invasion strength. The Siamese army, which also gathered up 50,000 men, attempted a last-ditch effort to prevent a siege of the city. In late January, the Siamese forces came out and attacked Burmese positions centered around the Bayonaung Pagoda. Mahanarata's army was on the west side of the pagoda and Thiphapad's was on the east. The initial Siamese attacks focused on the west wing, gradually driving back Mahanarata's army. But Thiphapad's army outflanked the Siamese lines from the east and succeeded in cutting the Siamese army in two. The Siamese vanguard, which was pushing Mahanarata's line, was completely encircled. The ensuing battle wiped out much of the several thousand-strong vanguard, and the rest were taken prisoner. The remaining Siamese troops retreated into the city and shut the gates. Early siege. The Siamese command had made careful preparations to defend the capital. The fortifications consisted of a high brick wall with a broad wet ditch. The walls were mounted with numerous guns and cannon that they had stockpiled since the last Burmese war. Finally, they had banked on the advent of the rainy season, which had more than once saved the city in the past. They believed that if they could only hold out until the onset of the monsoon rains and the flooding of the Great Central Plain, the Burmese would be forced to retreat. Realizing that they had less than 4 months before the rainy season, the Burmese command initially launched a few assaults on the city walls. But the place proved too strong and too well defended. Because of the numerous stockades outside the city, the Burmese could not even get near the wall, and those that got near were cut down by musket fire from atop. The The Burmese now drew a line of entrenchments round the city, and prepared to reduce it by famine. As time passed and no signs of surrender appeared, the approach of the dreaded rainy season caused alarm among the Burmese command. Several senior commanders advised calling off the invasion. However, Mahanarata decided to continue the invasion, and his colleague Thiphapat supported him. The Burmese command now made preparations to meet the rise of the river by collecting boats and building embankments on the bits of high ground. Rainy season. When the rains came, the Burmese line of entrenchment round the city was swallowed up by the rising river. The Burmese were now broken up into several corps, clinging on to artificial islands around the city. Seeing that the enemy was scattered into isolated camps, the Siamese attacked them in boats. The Burmese also had plenty of boats and met the Siamese boats in kind. In one of the naval battles, a Siamese commander, while waving his sword and hurling defiance in the bows of his boat, was brought down by musket shot, and the whole flotilla fled. In another encounter, one Siamese cannon shot scored a direct hit, killing several men on two Burmese boats. At any rate, the Siamese attempts to break the siege were unsuccessful. During this time, the Burmese troops farther back grew their own rice while the boats prevented supplies from entering the city. By the end of the monsoon season, the city was beginning to run low on provisions. Second dry season offensive. When the water subsided, the Burmese reconstructed the earthworks around the city, and gained more complete command than before. Some of the earthworks were higher than the walls, with cannon firing down on the city and the palace itself. Towards the end of 1766, the governors of Tak and Phitbury led a waterborne expedition to relieve the city but were driven back. The governor of Phitbury was killed. The governor of Tak, Takzan, an able and ambitious commander, was blamed for the failed expedition, and hindered in his attempts to mount an effective counterattack. By then, the city was starving. To make matters worse, a fire broke out within the city in early 1767 that burned 10,000 houses. All was not well for the invaders either. In December 1766, the Chinese launched the second invasion of Burma, directly aimed at Ava. Shanbi-Ushan, who had expected another Chinese invasion like the first one and had made preparations accordingly, was surprised by the sudden increase in the Chinese invasion force. Still, the fiery king was unwilling to recall the armies from Siam. Instead, he directed his remaining troops in northern Shan states to the Chinese front. He did, however, send a directive to his commanders in Siam to take the city quickly and return, as they were needed to defend the homeland. Indeed, when it appeared that the Chinese situation was contained, he later sent another directive to the Siamese front to persevere in the siege. Meanwhile, the Siamese leadership had grown desperate. The king and princes tried to escape the city but were driven back. The king finally offered to become a Burmese tributary, but the Burmese, who had just received the king's order to persevere, would not accept anything less than an unconditional surrender. Shortly after, Mahanarata died of illness, and by royal decree was buried with extraordinary honors. Nmyo Thiphapat now assumed the role of sole commander-in-chief. Sack of the city. By late March, the Burmese had dug tunnels to the walls, and mined them. At 4 p.m. on the 7th of April, several sections of the wall were brought down by the mines underneath, and the Burmese troops, supported by artillery fire, stormed the walls. The attackers finally breached the walls by sunset, and entered the city. The Siamese fought on inside the city but were eventually overwhelmed. Indiscriminate slaughter followed. Everything in sight was put to the torch. Even images of the Buddha were hacked for the gold with which they were coated. Tens of thousands of captives were led away to Burma in captivity. Virtually nothing was left of the 14th-century Grand Palace, home to 33 kings of 5 dynasties, or the glittering Sanford Prasat, used to welcome foreign envoys and state visitors. The Siamese king was found dead, identified by his brother, Thumphon. The Burmese brought Thumphon and hundreds of Siamese nobles and members of the royal family to be resettled in Burma. The city of Ayutthaya, far greater than any in Burma, with a population said to rival contemporary London or Paris, was reduced to ashes by the seemingly unstoppable Burmese military machine. So it was that the Ayutthaya kingdom, founded in 1350, came to its final end. But Siam was soon to re-emerge.